Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where we have some really, I would say, refreshing stories to discuss today. A little bit of a palate cleanser, but don't worry, there's still some comic book movie news mixed in here. But the first story is about Zac Efron, who's done a very good job transitioning to comedy. He seems to have found his niche, but I don't think that his footing is as steady as he and his management team would probably like. So he signed a deal at Cannes yesterday to star in an unlikely film. But first, let me paint a picture of where Zac Efron currently stands. So he's, of course, discovered that he's very funny, and we've discovered that he's very funny, but he's had a couple of misfires. It doesn't seem that even when he's in a comedy, it's a guaranteed box office success, which is a problem for him. For instance, Neighbors 2 didn't deliver, and neither did Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates. Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates, I think, was a little too raunchy and not funny enough to compensate. But I liked Neighbors 2 quite a bit. But anyway, he has Baywatch coming up opposite Dwayne Johnson, and I think that could maybe be, we'll have to see if that's funny enough to compensate for what is clearly a very raunchy movie. But he also has The Greatest Showman coming up opposite Hugh Jackman, a musical, a circus musical. And he also has a small role in James Franco's The Disaster Artist, which A24 just picked up, so that could end up being something of note. But anyway, at Cannes, the Cannes Film Festival, which is going on right now, they not only screen films in competition, but deals take place, particularly because it's the European market. So pictures come together not only with casting decisions like this one, but also the money will come together as well. Sometimes from an investor, sometimes from by selling the foreign distribution rights. Because, you know, you're over in Europe and you sell a bunch of foreign distribution rights, across the continent. And then you have enough money to finance your film, and you can either then go to the festival circuit and get a deal, a U.S. distribution deal there, or you get a U.S. distribution deal up front. But anyway, that's how they do a lot of these times, these small artsy films. They get their financing in Europe by getting that distribution set up, and then they wait to see how the reviews are on the festival circuit in the US, like Sundance, before they get a US distributor. And this might be one such film. So anyway, it's the story of Ted Bundy, the charismatic, handsome serial killer who really gruesomely murdered a number of women. It's like, if you go to his Wikipedia page, you're like, you're gonna do this, Zac Efron? Really? I don't know. But it's gonna be called Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. That's the name. I suspect that title will change. But it's gonna be directed by a documentary filmmaker, actually, Oscar-nominated Joe Berlinger. And it's going to be told from the perspective of Ted Bundy's girlfriend, which is an interesting choice. Actually, I just perused his Wikipedia page to get ready for this story, and Elizabeth Kloepfer was one of many girlfriends. But what's interesting about her is that she actually ended up becoming suspicious about him and worked with the police to catch him. So that could be really, really good. And she will be incredibly important casting to this movie working out. For instance, Margot Robbie's I, Tonya as Tonya Harding is a really good idea on paper, and it seemed like a really good idea as it started to come together, and it might still be a really good idea. But I think she seriously made a mistake by not casting a heavyweight actress as Nancy Kerrigan. And by that I mean someone who would also bring a lot of attention to the project. Like some of you recommended Anne Hathaway, and I think that would have been genius. But Margot Robbie wanted to make sure she was the center of attention, and I think it could end up hurting the project overall. So they need a really strong actress to be Elizabeth Kloepfer, and a festival-friendly actress, right? So anyway, I think this will be interesting. I mean, Zac Efron has experimented in the past. It's how he broke out of his High School Musical image. For instance, The Paperboy opposite Matthew McConaughey and Nicole Kidman for Lee Daniels. And I have to tell you, I thought The Paperboy wasn't bad, and I thought he was very good in it. So it's worked for him before, so I can see why he would do it again. But I think this is awfully risky. I feel that he and his management team are like, this is going to so be Christian Bale in American Psycho. Yeah, but I mean, although you think the things that Christian Bale had to do there were bad, this is going to be so much worse. But I'm sure that's what he thinks, that's what it's going to be like. But I think he has to also be aware that there's a possibility it could go in the other direction, and he could do a Tony Perkins in Psycho. Not just plain old Psycho, not American Psycho. And I think that would really not help his career, right? So it's very risky. I would have waited to see how The Greatest Showman does. If that's a huge hit, I would have, But can you afford to wait that long? I mean, he would have no projects on the horizon. I guess I could stall this and be like, maybe he'll make it. Let me just wait till Christmas. Let me just wait till Christmas. That's when that movie comes out this year. But I think, after Baywatch, all he has is really The Greatest Showman. Maybe one or two other things. But, you always have to sign your next deal before your latest movie comes out in case it's a bomb. And then you're like, yee. So anyway, I can see why he did it. I think it's a very risky choice, but I hope it works out for him. And look to see who gets cast as Elizabeth Kloepfer. I have no doubt in my mind Zac Efron will do a fabulous job. I'm a big Zac Efron fan. He's my pick for Nightwing, as you might recall. But, I think he's not... His career isn't strong enough quite yet from a business perspective, so I can see why he feels he has to do this. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, speaking of careers, Ludi Lin's is on the rise because he not only was recently the Black Power Ranger in Lionsgate's Power Rangers movie, but he's just joined the cast of Aquaman. That's fabulous for him. And I liked Ludi Lin in Power Rangers. I thought he did a nice job. He didn't have a big role. Nobody really had a huge role there. R.J. Seiler stood out the most, I think. But Ludi Lin, he certainly did make an impression with the little screen time that he had. But he's going to play a character called Murk, who's like part of Atlantean Special Forces and a trusted ally of Aquaman. And I think it's interesting because he is, a similar, regional ethnicity as Jason Momoa, right? And I think that what's interesting to me about that is that Ludi Lin would play an Atlantean when they've gone European, like white European for the other Atlanteans. Nicole Kidman, Patrick Wilson, Willem Dafoe, Dolph Lundgren, Amber Heard, right? A very Downton Abbey kind of cast. So to have suddenly be like, here's some diversity. Maybe that's why he and Aquaman get along. I mean, I like the idea that Jason Momoa will seem like an outsider, but I also, I was disappointed that they weren't, depicting the Atlanteans as Pacific Islander people. I thought that would have been very interesting, but we'll see how it turns out. But some people are like, Murk, forget that crap. I think he's going to be Aqualad. And I'm like, he might be. And maybe then, not only would he, maybe be friends with and work with Nightwing, right? And that reminds me of the upcoming DC streaming Titans show. And I'm like, you're not going to put Ludi Lin on a streaming service, are you? They could. I don't know. That would be such a strong connection between the movies and a smaller screen. I don't know if I would go there if I were the DCEU. But anyway, also the fact that, this is an Asian actor playing basically Aqualad, I think that's great because a lot of people wanted to see that kind of casting for Nightwing. So James Wan, while he's not putting Nightwing in his movie, I think he kind of delivered a little bit on that. So I'm excited to see it turn out, and I'm very excited to see how the Aquaman movie comes together. I have tremendous faith in James Wan. This is the episode of faith, right? Like, I love Zac Efron, I love James Wan. I believe these people can deliver. So don't prove me wrong, guys. All right, so the third story of the day, this is a little interesting side bit. Elle Fanning has signed a very good spokesperson deal with L'Oreal Paris. And this is very good for her because it's going to raise her profile and put her on par with some other actresses who currently have spokesperson deals. And so it makes her seem like she's got more momentum, more going for her, and it will help her get other roles. And I think so far she's doing a great job. Sometimes, actresses will be a spokesmodel for a brand and you just are like, I think a model would have done just as good a job. It used to be supermodels had these gigs, but now these days actresses get it, and that's why you really don't have any supermodels anymore. I think Gigi Hadid is the closest there is to a supermodel, and that's largely because of her reality TV connections through her mother, Yolanda. I really like reality. I like the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Her mother, Yolanda, who used to be a supermodel, or a semi-supermodel, really worked hard to get to launch her daughter's careers to her credit, their mother's credit. And she did a great job. And Gigi and Bella Hadid are successful today because their mother willed it. But anyway, they're the only really successful models. And I think that the modeling industry, as you've probably seen them say a couple of times, like Tommy Hilfiger was like, Gigi Hadid is not a model. They don't even see them as models. They're like quasi-actresses, I guess you could say. They're like Kendall Jenner, right? They're like that kind, like they're your personality. All right, so anyway, so you can use a social media personality or you can use an actress. So Elle Fanning's on the board for L'Oreal Paris, and I think her very charming first group of photos. I think she did a really nice job. But the other recent spokesmodel deal that was signed was Paris Jackson for Calvin Klein. I think she's a very good fit with that brand. And then also Jennifer Lawrence, of course, famously models for Dior. And Natalie Portman and Marion Cotillard both model for Chanel. Natalie Portman, I think, exclusively for their fragrances, and Marion Cotillard for their clothing and accessories. So I think the only pitfall potentially is that you would fall into just being a spokesmodel and you would stop working. For instance, Jessica Alba was getting a lot of sponsorship deals or spokesmodel deals for a while, and now she's just a businesswoman. Well, that's really not a fair representation. She's an incredibly successful businesswoman with her baby products brand. But she certainly doesn't act anymore. But anyway, it's interesting. Good for Elle Fanning. I think that should help her career. And it's going to help Paris Jackson's career with the Calvin Klein deal as well. Now, the viewer question is from Brandon Chambers, and a lot of people liked this question. That's one of the reasons that I decided to answer it, also because it's a good question, and also because Brandon said, I'm going to ask this every day until you answer it. So squeaky wheel gets the grease, Brandon. All right, I have said that. All right, so Brandon says, please answer my viewer question. Adorable. Dear Grace, I don't understand this play that Disney is making with this relatively new announcement. 2019 is set up to be a huge year for Disney, with the sequel to Avengers Infinity War and Star Wars Episode 9 set to bring a conclusion for some seriously massive story arcs for both respective franchises. You should write copy for Disney, Brandon. Okay, so he continues saying, why on earth is Disney placing Star Wars Episode 8's release date a mere 3 weeks after Avengers 4? Why? Avengers 4 has the potential to be the MCU's biggest film ever, if you ask me. He says, I could potentially see it passing the 2 billion mark. I like the way you're thinking, Brandon. So why, oh why, would you destroy the potential staying power of Avengers 4 with your own blockbuster movie? I mean, the Star Wars franchise has owned the last 2 Decembers. Why change that just to compete against yourself? Please, Grace, share your wisdom with us pitiful mortals. With all sincerity, Brandon B. Chambers. That's a beautiful, beautiful worded question, Brandon. All right, so anyway, Brandon's talking about the fact that Star Wars has opened quite successfully in December twice in a row now, and it has one more to go, The Last Jedi, before it moves to summer, being a summer release with the Han Solo spinoff and then Episode 9. Well, here's why. Disney has just so much product that, they're basically releasing a movie a month, or maybe in some cases 2 movies a month on the next couple of years, because they just have so much content. And the thing is that the 2 weekends in question, the first weekend of summer and Memorial Day weekend for 2019, a big movie is going to open no matter what. So Disney has decided to not only take that real estate for themselves, but they have to also get out of the way of some of their other movies. So first off, you might be like, why'd they leave December? Well, in 2018, they had to leave December because they have Mary Poppins coming out. So that's a problem. 2018, the Han Solo movie comes out in the summer. But then in 2019, they have Frozen 2 set for Thanksgiving. So that's going to make a ridiculous amount of money. And then they have 2 live-action fairy tales set for the holiday season as well. They have one set for 12/20, a Christmas release, but then also one at the beginning of the month, 11/8. I can't believe they're going to release 2 live-action fairy tales in that short span of time. Maybe they're hedging their bets as to what date they want to take. But as you can see, Disney has plans for the holiday movie season that year. So anyway, with Avengers 4 coming out 5/3/19, the first weekend of the summer, and then Star Wars Episode 9 set for Memorial Day weekend, 5/24/19, Brandon is concerned that they're not going to have enough space to make money. But I would caution you that Jurassic World and Age of Ultron in 2015 came out very close together, and both were able to join the $1 billion club. Jurassic World actually did a little bit better with 1.6, and Age of Ultron with 1.4. Don't forget that movies make money very fast these days. For instance, look how fast The Fate of the Furious got to $1 billion, like in 16 days. So I think there's a very good chance that Avengers 4 could have made $1 billion by the time Star Wars Episode 9 hits theaters. And don't forget, with Disney, they open their movies a week early overseas, so it could make a huge amount of money overseas before it even hits here the first weekend of May. And so, as you can see, the movies coexisted in 2015 just fine, although in that case it was from different studios. But Jurassic World came out June 12th, so that was like an extra 2 weeks that was given to Age of Ultron. But here's the thing. They can't open Star Wars Episode 9 in mid-June for 2 reasons. One, DC has already set June 14th for their own release. And then Toy Story 4 comes out 6/21, 1 week later. So they do not want Star Wars to wipe out Toy Story 4. And Toy Story 4 is a force to be reckoned with on its own. So you can see that things are very tightly booked for Disney. So the name of the game for them is going to be front-loading these pictures. That's how they're clearly hoping to make their money, which is interesting because Disney has come under fire lately for having very aggressive deals with the theaters. And for instance, one Drive-In wouldn't show Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 because they said Disney is too aggressive in what percentage they want up for the opening weeks of the film. As I've told you before, it's a sliding scale of the revenue split. And when a movie first opens, the majority of the revenue that's made from ticket sales goes to the studio because the idea is that everybody rushes to see the movie and they buy a lot of snacks, and that's how the theater makes its money. And then as an incentive to keep the movie playing in the theater longer, the longer it plays, the more the percentage shifts to the favor of the theater. But Disney, I guess because they know, but I think they feel their movies are such events that so many people will flock to your theater that they can ask for even more money in the first few weeks, and even a higher percentage of the revenue. And some movie theaters are starting to feel that leaves them not only does it leave them in a really weak position financially, but it's just not fair. And if they don't take a stand now, how bad could it eventually get? Will Disney eventually say they want 95% or 100% of the first week or two of theater tickets? So it is interesting, and especially considering this model that Disney doesn't expect their movies to play for a very long time, which makes it even more unfair to do that kind of revenue split at the beginning, because their movies are going to be done in 2 or 3 weeks by their own design. So I think it's fascinating, but Brandon, I wouldn't be too concerned. I think these movies are all so strong that Disney has positioned them out just enough to really maybe not leave any breathing room for anyone else. I mean, think about that poor DC film sandwiched between Star Wars Episode 9 and Toy Story 4. That doesn't leave a lot of breathing room. People only have so much money to spend. I think it might behoove Disney at a certain point to offer, well, I don't know if Disney would feel they would need to, but maybe other studios might need to offer some kind of incentive to go and, see all of their movies. It's crazy. It's really, really interesting. Although I will tell you that over at Regal, they sent me an email, just as an ad thing, and Disney does actually add an incentive if you see all 3 of their movies this summer. If you see Guardians, Pirates, and Cars 3, they will give you extra bonus Regal points on your card. They're go turbo and see all the movies. And I also think you get Disney Films Anywhere points as well. It's really interesting. I expect Disney to get even more aggressive on that front. So I hope that explains it for you, Brandon. Don't worry about it. I think both movies are going to do great. I would worry about everybody else's movies. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories, Brandon's viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching.